Hi, this is Brandon Younts from the implementation team, and today we're going to be discussing printed forms. So in order to understand printed forms, there is some security around it. In order to look at that, let's go to the admin menu and go to Security Editor. So there are a few different sections around our report designer and security. The first one I'm going to go to is Report Manager. So our Report Manager is an admin function that allows you to add or edit printed forms. So really you only want to give your admin users the access to this Report Manager. There is one other section in security that we lock down by default, but I like to show it. It's under Print Report. And under Print Report, there is a subsetting called Admin Mode. And so we default that to false for all security groups, but if it's set to true, it allows you to modify the printed form from the actual sales document itself. So in order to access the Report Manager, I'm going to go to the admin menu here and go to Report Manager. And so from here, this is where we can make adjustments to printed forms, or we can create brand new printed forms. So in our example today, I'm going to create a new order form. And the way I can do that is if I click on this order right here, what we see is these are all of our core or standard out of the box printed forms. And so you don't have the ability to modify those. However, you can copy it and then make a modification of that printed form. So I'm clicking on the order form, and then at the top, I'm going to go ahead and click the copy button. And that's going to prompt a screen to ask me what I want to name my printed form. So in this example, I'm going to call this my standard order form. Hit OK there. And so here's my standard order form that I just copied. And once I do have a custom printed form, you can see that it marks this is custom checkbox. And what I can do on that is copy this form. I can import an existing report file over this one. I can export this out to my desktop. The main thing I want to go to though is the design. So this is going to allow us to pull up our report designer and make modifications to my printed form. So if I click the design button, that's going to pull up what we call is our report designer. The SalesPad report designer is pretty easy to use. It's very comparable to Crystal reporting. What you'll see, we do have a few different sections that are part of this report designer. This main tab that I'm on right here, this has some features where you can save the form, you can change text settings within here as well, alignment. You can zoom in or out as well. To the right of the Report Designer tab is a Print Preview tab. So if I click on Print Preview, it's just going to do a print preview of the form that I'm modifying. HTML view would be if you wanted to see if this was sent like through an email, through HTML, exactly what it would look like. We do have some standard controls here on the left side as well. So the pointer is the main one that you'll use. That's what, if you want to move existing fields around, if you want to, just kind of navigate around the report designer itself, pointer is going to be the default. From here, we can add labels though as well, check boxes, picture, image boxes, barcodes will all be done from this standard controls section. And we have our main section of the report designer, and so this is where you're going to be changing the specific information or changing the layout of your printed form itself. And then to the right hand side, we do have a few different sections on here. So Report Explorer is what gets defaulted. And you can see that when a new field is created or when a field's on there, we don't use any specific field names. It basically just if it's a label, it's going to put XR label in front of it and then just the next number. Same thing with like the table fields. So tables, no specific names. It's really just what type of object it is and a number at the end of it. There's also a field list tab here as well. And so what this shows you is based on what form I'm modifying, so the order form, this shows or gives you the ability to add specific fields that are part of the business objects. So for example, I'm on the sales document table right now. These are all of the fields that are associated with the sales document. And so these are fields that you can add to your printed form. You'll notice as well, we have the ability to add GP user defined fields along with SalesPad user defined fields in here. On top of that, if there is another field that is not part of this business object that you want to add, you can do that through SQL. And you would also do that through this C sales document business object. So there's a sales document table, and then you can drill down to C sales document. So if there was a custom field that you did want to add that wasn't available here, you would go through sales document and then C sales document. If you need a sample of a custom stored procedure to pull in those custom values that aren't out of the box part of this report designer, you can contact our support team and they can provide you with that. Outside of that, if you needed assistance in loading the store procedure or adding fields to the store procedure, that would be additional implementation hours. When I actually click on a specific field as well, or if I click on a specific field in here, you'll notice that the property grid section down below will change. And so that's where I can change specific details about that field. So for example, this address field in here, if I want to change what borders are on it, or if I want to change the font style, the color, if I want to bold it, italicize it, can all be done through the property grid section. Now going back to the report designer itself, there are quite a few different options that you have here. So if I want to add a label to my printed form, I can just go to the label section here and just drag my label onto my form. And when I drag that on here, you'll see that now it just gives it the name of label 1. And you'll see it'll highlight this label 1 over here in the Report Explorer. In label 1, I can double click in here and this would allow me to add any text to this label that I wanted. So I can say this is Brandon's test label. And as you can see now, from my label, I can resize it through here if I need to. I can bold it. If I want to change my font size, I can do that all through here. Now on these labels or any field, if I actually click on it, you can see that's how you can resize it. But if I click this greater than sign in the upper right corner, there are some options available to it. So text, that's what I just typed in. That's my Brandon test label text. There's data binding as well. So maybe you didn't want to have text in here. You just want to bind it to data that's part of that printed form. So I'll delete my text out of here. And if I go to data binding, you'll see that it's similar to the right section in the field list over here. So let's go back to here. So data binding, like I said, very similar to this field list section here. So this is just another way that you can bind data to this field that I just added. So if I go to sales document and maybe I want to add the price level to my sales document header here. I can click price level and now we can see that this is now bound to the price level field. And you can tell when a field is specifically bound to something because in the upper right corner it has this yellow cylinder. So that means that that field that is on the printed form itself is linked to some type of data. So now if I go to print preview, you'll see that it pulls in my price level value for this sample order that I'm just doing a preview of. So there's my price level of retail. There are a few other options in here as well. Format string is the one that's used quite often. It's if you want to format the data that's being pulled into that field. So we see this used a lot with date fields, or we see it used a lot with decimal fields as well. Summary, if you wanted to sum specific data for the entire form. So maybe you have a calculated field or you have a field on the line level and you want to do a sum at the bottom of your form. That's what summary would be used for. A couple other ones on here that we use a lot, multi-line. So if your field is going to be more than one line, you'll definitely want to choose that multi-line because then it'll actually go to the next line instead of cutting it off. And then word wrap is an important one too. If word wrap is off, it won't it also won't go to the next line. It'll just it would cut off the word halfway through and then just move the rest of the word to the bottom line. So you'll always want to have word wrap on. So that's a label that we have here. Picture box, like I mentioned earlier. So if you wanted to add like a company logo, that's very common that we see. I'm going to delete this address off of here. But if I wanted to add a company logo or like a picture to my form, I can click this picture box standard control and just click back within here and then just kind of size my label however big I want it to be. So now I have my field on here and I want to add my logo. I'm going to go ahead and click this greater than sign, and then under the image there is an ellipsis to the right of it. And then I'm just going to go through, and you can really tie any type of image file to this logo or to this specific field, but I'll double click in my Tigers logo I have here. Now we can see it's getting cut off a little bit, and we do have some options to change the sizing of this. So if I go back to that greater than sign in the upper right corner, you'll see there is an option for sizing. So if I click on that, you can do things like stretch image, auto size, not one I would necessarily recommend because that will resize your actual picture box itself. Zoom image, that's one as well. Based on your size, it'll actually zoom in of the image. Squeeze, I would say, is probably one of the more popular ones as well. Really based on the size of your picture box itself, it's going to, choose the best size for your logo. I will say typically what we'll see is customers will do squeeze because a lot of the times it's a big logo and they'll want to squeeze it down to the size of their actual picture box field itself. Tile, we don't see a whole lot. Tile will essentially duplicate the image based on how big it is and how big your picture box is as well. Okay. So that's what the picture box would be used for. Another popular standard control that we see a lot is the table standard control. So if I click on the table field and then I just click in here, you'll notice that it automatically just adds a table. And you can double click in here and change your text if you want to. You can resize each column. They don't have to be the same size. If you want to add or remove columns, you can right click on them and do delete, or you can do an insert as well. And if you want to do maybe you want to do a completely another row, you can click the row below. I'll add another row to that table. Outside of that, though, the table itself is pretty easy to do. One thing I like to show off too, so if I click on this bottom row I just added, so obviously I can resize this as we can see here, but there's another way to resize this table cell as well. If I click the escape key on my keyboard, that'll just highlight this one row, and then I can make this smaller and they'll kind of shrink that up, or I can make just a specific row bigger. So again, I just clicked on one of my cells and hit the escape key, and that highlights the entire row. And then if you wanted to highlight the entire table, I could click escape again, and that'll actually resize the rest of the table. I can also resize the entire table too if I put my mouse cursor over it and just click those arrows right there, and that'll also give me the option to resize. So that's what the table would be used for. Two other ones I want to show real quick that are used quite often is the barcode. So if I click barcode here, then I can just choose a barcode for my printed form. Now this barcode right here, if I click this greater than sign, is going to have some options available to it. Symbology is the main one. We default to code 128. You'll see there are quite a few different barcodes that we do support within here. If you have any questions on that, you can email our support team. They can help you out with what barcodes we support and don't support. Module I don't really mess with a whole lot. So really what I want to do is I want to bind my barcode to some data. So I'm gonna bind it to my sales document number. So if I click on this drop down arrow and go to sales document, and then I'll find sales document number in here. Now what that means is if I scan this barcode, so if I do a print preview right now, you'll see that I get this error message. Controls boundaries are too small for the barcode. And so what that means is my barcode is too small that I have to essentially contain this data right here so it doesn't actually print the barcode. So a lot of the times what the customers will do, if I go to Report Designer, you can either expand your barcode itself, do a print preview, and you'll probably see that now my barcode's big enough. But in my sample, this barcode's way too big. I don't have enough room for it. So what I can do is if I go back to Report Designer, I'm going to shrink that down again. But what a lot of our customers will do is this auto module feature. So essentially it'll automatically change the module or the size of the barcode based on the size that you have of your actual barcode itself. So if I go to print preview now, you'll notice that my bars on my barcode are a little, they're a little closer together. It looks a little different than based on me resizing it. I would keep in mind though, if you are using auto module, you'll want to make sure that your scanner that you're using to scan those barcodes can still pick up that barcode after you've, chosen the auto module feature. Show text, what that would be used for is if you want the text or the data of that barcode to print under the barcode itself. A lot of our customers will uncheck that just to give themselves some more space for that barcode. Also in the greater than sign, you can change the orientation. So if you wanted to rotate the barcode, to the left, to the right, you have that option as well from within here. So some people will do that. They'll want a vertical barcode. That's what that would be for. I'm going to delete my barcode here. And the last one I wanted to show is very important is the page info standard control. So the page info standard control is going to have a couple key fields that we see on pretty much every printed form. The first one that you see here is, if I click this greater than sign, is the page number. So you'll see here it does the current of total page numbers. So right now it's doing 1/1. And you can format really that in any way you want. So if you wanted to do, for example, maybe I wanted to say 1 of 1 or 1 of 2 or something like that. What you can do is change the format of that. So for example, I could do curly bracket 0. That's going to be my first page number. And then I can type in of, and then I can do another curly bracket and 1. And what that's going to do is my second value. So that'll do 1 of 1. If I had 3 pages, it would say 1 of 3. If I was on the second page, it would say 2 of 3. So that's what the format would actually be used for. You can also just have it print the current page number. That's what that would be for. The other two main ones that we see used in the page information would be the current date and time. So if I click that, you'll see that it just does my current date right now. It doesn't actually show my time. And what I can do, if I want to see, format my date a specific way, same thing. I can go to the format field here. And then if I just go to date time, you'll see all the different ways we can format the date time field here. I'd say this format right here is probably the more popular format that we see for date and times on printed forms. So what this would be used for is if your customer wanted to see the date and time that specific form was printed, that's what they would use. Lastly, the other option on here is the username. And so what that would be for is not who created the sales document. This would be for who printed the sales document. So a lot of my customers will want to see the actual person who printed the sales document. That's what the username would be used for. So those are some of the main standard controls that we see used within our printed form designer here. Now you'll see that on our standard printed form, there is a detail report that pulls in the line item information. And so this is going to pull in pertinent information about, your specific lines on the order itself. And so if I click on, for example, I'm on the quantity field right now. If I click on that greater than sign and look at my data binding, you'll see that it looks at the sales document table and then looks at the sales line items table. So if I pull this open, just expand it. So I want to go to the top here just to show you guys, a specific way or how this needs to be pulled in per line. So if you are linking sales line data, you need to start with the sales document table in the data binding and then go down to the sales line items table. And then once you're in there, you can actually choose your line item specific field. So in our scenario, we're using quantity. If I just went directly, so if I go back up here, if I just went in directly to the sales line items table, it doesn't know which item to actually pull it for. And so if I chose quantity here, it would just display the quantity, the exact same quantity for every single line based on whatever the first line is for the order. So for example, if I had my first line on my order was an A100 and a quantity of 10, it would literally print that quantity for every single item on my order. So again, what you'll want to make sure you do is when you are doing data bindings for sales line items, I'm starting with sales document, sales line items, and then going to quantity. We do have some default format strings in here as well. You can Google any of these, and we pretty much are going to support any of the format strings that you'll find within here. You'll notice on the printed forms that each of these sections are in their own different bands. And so if I actually click on one of the bands itself, like this group header band, they do have some options available to them. So it's the same thing, I'm going to click that greater than sign here. A couple of the main options that you'll see are the repeat every page. And so what that would be for is if you want this group band, or if this section, you want this to print every single page, you would have this checkbox checked for repeat every page. If you didn't want it to print every page, you just uncheck that. Keep together would mainly be used for like a group footer. So let's say, for example, you have 10 line items on it, and it's going to cut off the full page. The page is too big. If keep together is checked, it'll actually take this group footer and print it on a new page. However, if keep together is unchecked, in our scenario it was unchecked, it would, in the page ended after the tax field, on the next page it would only just print the freight, trade discount, and total. Basically just kind of cut it off at this when I'm putting my mouse over right here. So that's what the keep together option would be used for. You can expand the margins on these forms as well. If I scroll, let's go to my Report Explorer tab, and if I scroll all the way to the top, you'll see that there's an option for RPT order. What that would allow you to do is really kind of change the margins on the printed form itself. So you can see this margin sections right here. If you want to change the specific margins, you can type that in within here, and that'll adjust your margins for that printed form. From this section as well, there are a couple other options. Watermark is one of them. So if I go to a watermark, it's at the top here under this appearance section. If I click the watermark and expand that, you'll see that you can actually do an image as a watermark. You can do text as a watermark. You can choose any of these, or you can type in your own text, and you can change like the color and font of that watermark as well. There's also a section on here on the RPT order section for script language. So I'm not going to go into any scripting around these printed forms, but if you are familiar with scripting around forms itself, there is a script section here. We do default our own scripting on these printed forms, and it is in C#. However, for some reason, if you want to do Visual Basic or JavaScript, it can be done within here as well. When making adjustments to printed forms, sometimes if a field, for example, if I expand this out, you'll notice it'll turn red. So that either means two things. It's in the margin, so it's printing within my margin that I have here, or it's being overlapped by another field. So you'll notice too, if I just expand this, that's going to turn red as well. And so if it is in the margin here, you'll notice that when you go to actually do a print of this printed form itself, you'll get an error message that'll say document is outside the margins. Do you still want to print? There is a way to disable that specific message. And if I go to the RPT order and there's a show print margin warning, you can just change that to no. So that'll make it so it's not popping up every single time you go to print the document itself. When you are done making adjustments to your printed form itself, you'll want to make sure when you are done you click this Save button in the upper left corner, just this Save icon. And then you can click the X in the upper right, and that'll take you back to your report manager, and now we can see here's my printed form. Now let's say I want to make another adjustment to it. I can click Design. So I want to make another adjustment to my form. So I'll just drag this back in, and I'm going to delete my master number field here. Now I save it again, exit out. When I click back on my form, we can see my other changes have been made. But let's say my users are complaining and they say, Brandon, we want a master number back. We like seeing that on our order form. You'll notice now, since I've made changes to my form, there is a history button. And if I click that history button, you can see here we save all versions of that printed form. So any adjustments that are made through the report designer, we save all of those versions of the form within here. And so from here, you could replace that current version. You can delete older versions. You can create a brand new form off of one of the older versions, all from this screen. So if I click replace, it's going to ask me if I want to replace my form to what it initially was. And I click yes there. And now we can see when I go back to that order form that my master number field is back on here. We also do have a sample document number field here as well, if you wanted to, look at a specific sales document in your system and preview from here. And those are all the features of our report manager, along with modifying a printed form itself. Thank you for watching our video.